Let's go, let's grow, let's get it.
Carlos V. Spencer here with another episode, another week coming to you, speaking to you, getting you better. While you've been watching these other episodes, I know you've been getting better, so we're glad you came back to better yourself even more. Today, what are we dealing with? Running your race, your particular race. What I find out when I'm talking to a lot of people is that they feel like they may be doing something that somebody else is doing, right? And so maybe I shouldn't launch out and do it. Maybe I shouldn't jump out and do it because I'm a chef and that somebody else is already being a chef. I'm playing basketball that somebody else is already playing basketball. I'm a coach. Somebody else is always a coach. Run your race, right? Do what you're called to do. Somebody's looking for you to do what you do. So when you run your own race, you're in your own lane. You're not trying to be somebody else. I've heard it said before, you have to be yourself. Because if you're being somebody else, nobody's there. Watch this. If you're pretending to be somebody else, the person you're pretending to be is not there. And if you're pretending to be somebody else, then you're not there. So nobody's actually there. You have to show up and be yourself and run your own race. Somebody's looking for exactly what you're giving the way that you're giving it. If you're a speaker, you come into this world of speaking and you find yourself at some point saying, everybody's speaking. Or everybody's doing this. Does that mean you should stop? One of my mentor's friends once came to me and my children play sports. And I was asking him kind of a similar question. Why do you think you have success in this path that you're going down? And he was like, okay, your children play sports, right? I said, yeah. And they were playing basketball in particular. I said, yeah. He said, well, why don't you tell them to quit? I'm like, why am I telling them to quit? I'm their father. Why am I telling them to quit the sport? He said, well, why don't you tell them to quit? There's already been a Michael Jordan. There's already been a LeBron James. There's already been a pro. So if there's already been somebody else who was successful in this sport, then why don't you just quit? I said, And then it dawned on me. If you're doing what you're doing, then you're doing it in a way that nobody else can actually do it, even though you're doing something that somebody else is doing themselves. I'm going to say that one more time. If you're doing what you're doing it in a way that nobody else is doing it. Because if you're doing what somebody else is doing, you're doing it the way that you do it and not the way that they do it. So you're still being an original. Go forth, run your own race. I also say this, when it comes to running your own race, I also say stay in your lane. Or not just stay in your lane, run your race in your lane, and you'll find out when you're running your race in your lane, there is no competition. There's no competition in competing for doing what you do the way that you do it. There's no competition is there. Now, there's healthy competition. I'm a person who plays sports. There's healthy competition. There's healthy competition even in what I'm doing. I have other business partners who are doing certain things. So don't get away from competition that's healthy, but get away when you're competing with somebody or you find yourself putting yourself up against somebody who's doing the same thing that you're doing and you feel like you just can't do it just because they're doing it. I'll say this again, there is no competition. I don't want you to be discouraged by what you're doing on the level that you're doing it on. Because at that level, it might be difficult, but once you get to a higher level, you're going to find out there is no competition. Once you get to a higher level, once you build this foundation, and once your plane actually takes off, I wish I had time to go into it. When a plane is on the runway, it takes a lot of energy to get that plane off the runway up into the air. But once that plane finally gets to an altitude where it's supposed to be cruising, it doesn't take as much energy to cruise as it does to take off. That means when you're doing something at the beginning stages, it's going to be difficult. When you're doing something at the beginning stages, it's going to be hard. But you will find yourself getting to a level where there is no competition. You'll find yourself getting to a level, you can quote me on this. When you get to a higher level, it's like, what's the best way I can paint this picture? It's like running a race. Watch this. And there's 8 different races going on. In your particular race, let's say there's 5 lanes, but there's 8 different races going on, and each race has 5 lanes. When you get to a certain level, please grasp this. When you get to a certain level, you're running your race, and there's nobody you're competing with, and there's nobody even running in the other races because you're at such a high level. So not only can you run your race and win after you won yours, you can go jump in the other race with 5 more lanes that nobody's in and go win that one. And then jump another one and win that one. What do you mean, Carlos? I'm saying that when you get to a certain level, there is no competition. When you get to a certain height to doing what you do, when you built your foundation, if you built yourself up to a certain level, when you get yourself to that point, you'll find out that I'm no longer competing with anybody. Again, back to what we said at the beginning, I'm no longer competing with anybody because I fine-tuned doing what I do the way that I do it. And since I fine-tuned doing what I do the way that I do it, nobody else is doing it that way, so I'm not competing against anybody. I also don't want you to get discouraged in the beginning when you're building a foundation and you're doing what you're doing and you find out that it might be difficult at that stage. I'm here to tell you, keep going, don't give up, don't quit, because you're gonna find yourself at a level on the stage when it gets easier. True story. I was a New York State trooper, and going through the New York State Police Academy is a paramilitary academy, if you're familiar with that, which means it was an academy where we slept there. Like, we stayed there the entire week. Military structure, military rules, yes sir, no sir, attention, at ease, standing at the right side of the hallway for 6 months. Never walking on the left side of the hallway, like all turning, squaring your corners, shining your shoes. And it was very difficult to go through that process, to go through that 6-month process. As a state trooper, state police officer, it's more difficult to get into than say a city police officer. Now, a city police officer still has a difficult job, don't get me wrong. But I am telling you, it's factual, that a person who's a New York State police officer, it's harder to get in. Watch this, I'm gonna tell you, catch this, please catch this. It's harder to get in, but once you actually get to the level of doing the job that you're doing is not as difficult as the job of somebody who's working in a popular city who's a city police officer. I want you to catch that. Now, there are some nuances. Yeah, there's some different things you may do that may be difficult. For the most part, and I can say this because I've done this myself, and I've heard other people and seen other people who work in the city. Catch what I'm saying. It's difficult to get into. It's more difficult to get into. But once you get into it and you're actually doing the job, it's not as difficult when you get into that part of the job. This other job, it's not as difficult to get into, but the job itself is difficult. Don't give up. And don't quit, because you're in the beginning stages of doing something that's great. You're in the beginning stages of doing something that's high level. You're in the beginning stages of doing something or getting into something that everybody's not doing. Let's be honest. If it was easy, everybody would do it. So you're in the beginning stages of doing this thing, and it is hard. It is difficult. It is a lot to do. But you're going to find yourself, just like that airplane, sooner or later at a point where it's not as difficult to do the thing that you're doing now. Let me give you a example. Find somebody who's let's say famous. Let's say a famous singer. Let's say a famous comedian. Find a famous comedian and find a comedian who's just starting out. This comedian just starting out, maybe working all day, all night, maybe driving 5 hours to go do a show that's 30 minutes, maybe trying to promote their show, and they got 100 seats at the show and only 20 people are showing up, and they're doing this for years and years and years, and it's a lot of work. You have this comedian who's established and they're famous, and they put the word out one time and they sell out in 20 cities in a matter of 30 minutes. They've built themselves up, I think you get what I'm saying, to a level now where they don't have to work as difficult to get the results that they had to work at the lower level. But they had to work through the difficult level to get to the higher level where things are easier now. Watch this. The thing that they're doing, they're probably even doing it on a better level. They've gotten better, but they don't have to put as much work in to getting the results that they're trying to get. I'm telling you, here's a scripture that will sum up what we're talking about. The race is not given to the swift or to the strong, but to the one who endures to the end. that means the race isn't given to the person who starts off and they're fast, or they start off and they're just strong. The race is not given to that person. It's not won by that person. It's won by the person who endures and keeps going until they get to the end. I'm telling you to endure. I'm telling you to run your race. I'm telling you to stay in your lane. I'm telling you that somebody is looking for you. Look at me. Somebody is looking for you to do the thing that you're doing, and they need you to do it. They're not looking for somebody else. They're not looking for another chef. Oh, there's a whole bunch of, they're not looking for another teacher. They're not looking for another coach. They're looking for you, and they can't find you because you haven't kept going to get to that level yet. If you quit and give up, they'll never find you. But if you keep going, you'll be satisfied. They'll be satisfied. You'll serve the world the way that you're supposed to serve. Run your race. Do the things you're supposed to be doing. My name is Carlos V. Spencer. Keep going and never give up. Let's go. Let's grow.
Let's go. Let's grow.